The night had moved gently toward its middle hour when Mara came from the entrance hall into the seed library. She carried the conservatory logbook beneath one arm and the observatory register in her hand. The register had finished its brief journey through her part of the night. Its pages had shown her the ordinary reason visitors came up to the roof. To stand beneath an open section of sky, look through the telescope, and spend a little quiet time above the glasshouse rooms. Now it was ready to be returned to its shelf. The seed library door opened easily. Mara stepped inside and let it close behind her without haste. The room was cooler than the entrance hall, though not cold. Its air held the dry, mild scents of paper, wood, and stored seed. Rain rested softly on the glass overhead. Here, the drops sounded smaller than they had in the fern hall, more like fingertips moving patiently across the panes. A shaded lamp lit the central table, and a second lamp cast an even line of light across the drawer fronts. Mara paused long enough for her eyes to settle. The library was arranged for finding things without fuss. Low wooden cabinets stood along the walls, each divided into shallow drawers. The drawers were grouped in clear sections, and every section had its own neat run of labels. Some labels were fixed in small holders on the drawer fronts. Others were tied to packets within, where they could remain with the seeds if a packet was lifted out for catalog work. On the table lay the notebook Mrs. Sato had returned. It had been placed squarely beside Mara's logbook, with its cover closed and its spine turned toward the chair. A small return slip rested beneath the lower edge so it would not be separated from the notebook before Mara recorded it. Nothing about it asked for immediate attention. It was simply one more object that had come back to its proper room and now needed to be entered, checked, and shelved. Mara set the observatory register at the far end of the table, away from the returned notebook. The two books had different places and different purposes, and she liked that the room made those differences easy to see. The register belonged on the shelf nearest the entrance hall door, where it could be collected before the next observatory evening. Mrs. Sato's notebook belonged farther inside the library, among the records used for seed cataloging. She placed her pencil beside the logbook and loosened her shoulders. The walk from the roof had left a little of the cooler upper air in her sleeves. The seed library's stillness met it gently. She could feel her breathing return to the pace of the room. Easy, regular, and unforced. Her first task was to return the observatory register. The shelf was only a few steps from the table. Mara carried the register over, read the label on its spine once, and found the matching place between two other slim volumes. She slid it in until all three spines stood level. Then she ran one finger lightly along the shelf edge, checking that no paper had folded beneath the books. The register settled into place without resistance. That small return completed the work carried in from the observatory. The roof had been closed beneath thin cloud. The visitor register had explained its own quiet use, and now the book was back, where the next round would expect to find it. Mara did not need to think any further ahead. The roof belonged to its hour, and the seed library belonged to this one. She returned to the table and opened the conservatory logbook. The page already held the earlier entries from her shift. Her pencil moved steadily as she added a short line for the observatory register, returned to the seed library shelf. Cover and pages dry, position checked. The pencil made a soft, companionable sound over the paper. When the sentence was finished, she set the pencil down across the open page, rather than closing the book. There would be more to record before she left. Next came Mrs. Sato's notebook. Mara lifted the return slip first. It gave the notebook's catalog mark and the date it had come back to the entrance hall. She read both without needing to repeat them. Then she opened the notebook at the inside cover and found the same mark written there in a careful hand. The two matched. She entered the return in the logbook, keeping the words plain. Notebook received. Catalog mark confirmed. Ready for shelf check. After that, she turned her attention to the drawers. The cabinet nearest the table contained the first part of the night's sorting. Its drawers were shallow enough that Mara could see their contents without moving anything unnecessarily. Each front carried a label in a narrow holder. The labels made a calm progression from one drawer to the next, and the packets inside followed the same order. Mara began at the upper left. She read the first label, opened the drawer by the small wooden pull, and let it come forward until it rested at a comfortable distance. Inside, seed packets stood in rows with their written edges facing upward. None had spilled or turned over. She checked the first packet, the middle packet, and the last, making sure the sequence within the drawer agreed with the label outside. Then she closed it. The second drawer needed only the same measured attention. Open, look, compare, close. The third held one label that had shifted slightly within its holder. Mara pressed it back until its margins were even. There was no need to replace it. The writing remained clear, and the card itself was sound. She noted the adjustment in the logbook. By the fourth drawer, the task had found its rhythm. Mara no longer needed to think about each movement before making it. Her hand found the pull, the drawer moved outward, and the packets waited in their ordered rows. The work was quiet, but not empty. Each label gave her something definite to confirm. Each drawer offered a small beginning and a clear end. Rain continued above the glass. The sound neither strengthened nor faded. It simply remained a fine pattern over the dry room. At the middle of the cabinet, Mara stopped to look back over the drawer fronts she had checked. Their labels sat level, in a single line. The closed drawers rested flush with the frame. Her pencil marks in the logbook formed a short column. Order correct. Label straightened. Packet sequence confirmed. There were more drawers below, but she did not need to complete the whole cabinet at once. The ordinary stopping point was already marked by the change from the upper section to the lower one. She finished the last drawer in the upper row, closed it carefully, and laid her palm for a moment against the smooth wooden front. That section was settled. Mara returned to the table and placed Mrs. Sato's notebook beside the open logbook. Its catalog mark had been confirmed, and the shelf position it belonged to could be checked during the next part of the round. For now, it rested exactly where she needed it, no longer waiting in the entrance hall, not yet put away without a proper entry, but received and recorded. She drew a small pencil line beneath the completed drawer section. It was a simple mark, enough to show where she had stopped and where she would begin again. The observatory register stood back on its shelf. The upper drawers were in order. Their labels were straight, and the returned notebook had been entered in the logbook. Around her, the seed library held its quiet arrangement of wood, paper, and careful names. Mara left the logbook open beneath the shaded lamp and set the pencil beside it. The next task was ready, but it was not calling her onward. It could wait in the same patient order as everything else in the room. Mara began again at the pencil line she had drawn beneath the completed upper section. The observatory register was back on its shelf, its part of the night finished. The roof had been closed beneath thin cloud, and the reason for keeping its visitor book nearby was now plain to her. That earlier work remained behind her without being forgotten. It had simply reached its proper ending, leaving her free to give the seed library the same steady attention. She stood before the cabinet nearest the table and looked from the checked upper drawers to the lower section waiting beneath them. The shaded lamp reached every label without glare. Rain moved softly over the glass above, its fine, even sound making the dry room feel especially sheltered. Mara opened the first drawer below the dividing rail. The packets inside stood with their marked edges facing upward. She read the label on the drawer front, then compared it with the first packet the packet at the center, and the last packet in the row. Their catalog marks followed in order. Nothing had been turned around, and nothing belonged farther along. She closed the drawer until its front rested flush with the cabinet. The next drawer contained fewer packets, so she checked each one. The first two were in sequence. The third had been placed one position too early, before a packet whose catalog mark came ahead of it. Mara lifted both just high enough to exchange their places. She did not disturb the rest of the row. Once the two were settled, she read the sequence again from beginning to end. This time it moved cleanly. She returned to the table and wrote a short entry in the logbook. 2 packets reordered in lower section, marks confirmed. Her pencil made the same dry, companionable sound it made during the earlier entries. She set it beside the open page and went back to the cabinet. The third lower drawer opened with a quiet movement of wood against wood. Its outer label was level, but the packets inside had gathered slightly toward one side. Their order was correct. Mara placed 2 fingers against the final packet and eased the row toward the center, leaving an even space at either end. There was no need to write that down. The adjustment had changed no catalog position and no label. It had only left the row easier for the next person to read. She closed the drawer and moved to the next. Here, one packet had its written edge facing downward. Mara lifted it, turned it once, and returned it to the same place. Its catalog mark belonged between the packets on either side. When all 3 marked edges faced upward, the order could be understood at a glance. Open, look, compare, adjust, close. The sequence was already familiar from the upper section, but the lower drawers asked for slightly different decisions. One needed every packet checked because the row was short. Another could be confirmed by reading the beginning, middle, and end. A shifted packet needed reordering. A turned packet needed only to face the same way as the others. The work remained simple because each choice had a clear reason. Mara checked the next drawer and found that its contents were in order. She checked the one below it and found the same. On the following drawer, the label card had moved within its narrow holder until one edge nearly disappeared beneath the frame. She pressed the card gently from the opposite side. It slid back into the center, but the lower corner did not lie quite flat. Mara drew the card out far enough to inspect it. The writing was clear, and the card was dry. Its corner had only curled slightly from use. She smoothed it beneath her fingertips on the cabinet top, then returned it to the holder. This time both margins showed evenly, and the whole catalog mark could be read without leaning closer. In the logbook, she added, lower label centered, card sound. The words were plain because the work was plain. Anyone reading the entry later would know that the label had been checked and did not need replacing. Mara liked the economy of that. A brief note could prevent a second person from wondering whether something remained to be done. She continued down the cabinet. At each drawer, she first read the outer label. Then she opened it only as far as needed. She followed the packet marks from left to right, allowing the order to guide her hand. When 2 packets shared the same first part of a mark, she used the final part to decide which belonged first. When a row was already correct, she left it untouched. The cabinet gradually became a record of completed decisions. Closed drawer fronts formed an even plane beneath the lamp. Centered labels made a quiet line across the wood. Inside, the packets remained where their marks said they should be, easy to find and easy to return. Halfway through the lower section, Mara paused and looked toward the table. Mrs. Sato's notebook still lay beside the open logbook. Its return slip remained beneath its lower edge, and the catalog mark inside the cover had already been confirmed. The notebook did not interrupt the drawer route. It waited for its place in the same way the unchecked drawers waited for theirs. Mara returned her attention to the cabinet. The next drawer belonged before the one beneath it, and the labels showed that clearly. Inside, however, the final packet carried the first mark of the following drawer's sequence. Mara checked it twice, first against the packet before it, and then against the label below. The packet had simply been returned one drawer early. She lifted it without opening any other packet, or changing anything written upon it. Then she closed the first drawer, opened the one beneath, and found the packet's proper position at the beginning of that row. Its mark came before every other mark there. Mara placed it at the front. She read the lower row once more. The moved packet now began the sequence naturally, followed by the packets that had already been waiting behind it. She closed the drawer, reopened the one above, and confirmed that its remaining packets now ended within the range shown on its front. Both drawers were correct. In the logbook, she recorded the move in one sentence, naming the two catalog positions rather than describing it as a mistake. The important thing was where the packet had been and where it now belonged. Nothing more was needed. Rain continued across the overhead panes. The sound was soft enough that Mara could hear the faint touch of pencil on paper and the gentle stop of each drawer as it closed. The library held the coolness of the middle shift, along with the dry scent of paper and wood. Only 3 lower drawers remained. The first was in order from beginning to end. The second had a label that sat squarely in its holder and a short row of packets arranged correctly. The final drawer was the widest in the section, though it was no deeper than the others. Mara drew it outward and rested one hand beneath the pull while she checked the row. She began with the first mark and moved steadily along. Each packet followed the one before it. None had folded at the edge. None had turned over. The last mark agreed with the range on the drawer front. Mara closed the drawer. She stood for a moment before the whole cabinet. The upper section had been checked earlier. Now the lower section was finished as well. The drawer fronts were flush. The labels could be read easily, and the packets followed their catalog order within. She returned to the table and drew a second pencil line beneath the entries for the lower drawers. Then she brought Mrs. Sato's notebook closer. The return slip and the mark inside the cover matched, as she had already confirmed. Mara found the corresponding place in the catalog sequence and checked the notebook's spine once more. It belonged farther inside the seed library, among the records used for this room's work, just as she had understood on arriving. Before shelving it, she entered the final part of its return. Catalog position located, condition checked, the cover was dry. The pages sat evenly. Nothing was loose at the spine. Mara lifted the notebook and carried it along the cabinets, following the labels she had just checked. She did not need to search from shelf to shelf. The catalog marks led her directly to the correct section. At the matching place, she paused. The notebook's return had been recorded, but its catalog entry included a brief contents check before final shelving. That was the next ordinary step, and it could be done at the table beneath the shaded lamp, rather than standing beside the cabinet. Mara carried the notebook back and set it squarely beside the logbook. She removed the return slip from beneath its cover and placed the slip on top, where it could be entered with the contents check. Then she rested the pencil across the completed drawer entries. The observatory register was settled on its shelf. The cabinet was in order from the upper left drawer to the final lower row. Labels were centered, packets faced upward, and the few misplaced items had been returned to the positions shown by their marks. Only Mrs. Sato's notebook remained open to the next part of the work. Mara sat beneath the lamp with the returned notebook before her and the catalog record beside it. The drawer round had reached its quiet ending. The room was ready for her to turn the cover and read what had been brought back. Mara sat beneath the shaded lamp with Mrs. Sato's notebook before her and the catalog record beside it. The drawer round had ended neatly. Every packet in the cabinet now followed its mark. Every label could be read without leaning closer, and the few adjustments she had made were recorded in the conservatory logbook. Only the notebook's contents check remained. She opened the cover carefully and rested it flat upon the table. The pages settled without needing to be pressed. They were dry, and even as she had already noted, and the binding held them securely at the spine. Inside, the notebook was practical from the first page. Mrs. Sato had used it to record seed names, catalog marks, and the dates on which she had consulted particular drawers. Some entries filled half a page. Others were no more than a line beside a date. The handwriting was small but clear, with enough space between one note and the next that Mara could follow each entry easily. She checked the first page against the catalog description. The title matched. The catalog mark appeared again in the upper corner. A short contents list named the sections in their proper order. Mara turned several pages, looking for loose sheets, folded corners, or marks that might need to be mentioned before the notebook went back on its shelf. There were none. Rain moved softly over the glass above her. In the seed library, it sounded fine and light, almost like the quiet movement of paper beneath her fingertips. The lamp made a warm circle across the table, leaving the cabinets beyond it in a gentler shade. Their straight rows of labels were still visible, though she no longer needed to read them. Near the middle of the notebook, Mara found the most recent entry. It stood beneath a plain date and occupied only a modest part of the page. Mrs. Sato had written, "Night staff check the warm rooms, the cool rooms, the watering, and the shaded lamps. The seed library stays dry and ready for quiet readers, and the observatory is prepared for its public evenings. The entrance hall receives visitors and keeps the passage between them clear." Mara read the entry once. Then she read it again, not because it was difficult, but because its plainness gathered several parts of her work into one place. The warm rooms and the cool rooms could not simply be left to the same setting until morning. Their temperatures changed at different rates after the day visitors had gone. Water that was right for one room might be unnecessary in another. A shaded lamp needed checking because some plants required its steady warmth while the rest of the building settled into darkness. The seed library had its own night needs. It had to remain dry, orderly, and easy to use. Returned records had to be entered. Labels had to stay legible. A notebook left at the entrance hall had to complete its journey back to the shelf rather than wait there for the next day. The entrance hall had a simpler purpose. Its lamps lit the reception surface and the connected passage. It gave people a clear way into the seed library or onward toward an observatory evening. But it was not itself the refuge Mrs. Sato had described. That quiet use belonged to the seed library and the observatory. One offered dry shelves, shaded light, and a table where a visitor could sit with records. The other offered the telescope and a little time beneath the open section of roof. People came because those rooms allowed stillness as well as ordinary public use. The entrance hall simply received them and joined the paths together. Mrs. Sato had not presented any of this as an explanation. She had simply written down what she had observed. That made sense to Mara. During her earlier rounds, she had learned each task separately. She had checked temperatures because the log required them. She had watered where the soil showed that water was needed. She had adjusted lamps, straightened labels, returned books, and left each room ready for whoever would enter next. None of those actions had seemed unusual on its own. Now they rested together as one routine. The conservatory was tended overnight because its rooms did not all keep the same hours in the same way. Warmth, coolness, moisture, and light continued to change after the doors grew quiet. The seed library and observatory also remained modest public refuges, places where people could consult a record, sit for a while, or look through the telescope during a public evening. Between them, the entrance hall remained what it needed to be: a connected reception and passage space, sheltered, lit, and clear. There was nothing hidden beneath the work. The night round was simply the care required to let several different rooms remain themselves. Mara looked up from the notebook. The seed library gave her an immediate example. Its air was cool and dry. Paper and wood held their mild scent beneath the glass. The lamps were bright enough for catalog work, but shaded so the room did not feel harsh. The table offered a clear place to read. The returned observatory register stood on its shelf near the entrance hall door. Mrs. Sato's notebook rested open in the circle of light, ready to return to its own place farther inside. Beyond the door, the entrance hall kept a slightly different atmosphere. Its stone carried a trace of the damp weather outside, and the leaves near it brought a clean green scent into the passage. Its reception surface waited beneath the lamps, and the route through it remained clear. The two rooms stood close together, but they did not need the same care or serve the same purpose. Mara understood that without having to turn it into a larger thought. She lowered her eyes to the page again. Beneath Mrs. Sato's entry was a shorter note about the notebook's catalog section. Mara checked that note against the record beside her. The section number matched the shelf position she had located during the first round. She turned the remaining pages one at a time. The entries continued in the same calm manner. Seed marks, drawer references, dates, and brief observations about the records consulted. Nothing else required special attention. No page was missing. No writing had become too faint to read. The notebook had been used carefully and returned in good condition. Mara closed it and let her hand rest on the cover for a moment. Then she drew the logbook toward her. Her pencil moved steadily across the open page as she completed the return entry. Contents checked, pages secure, catalog position confirmed. After a small pause, she added one more line to record the useful note she had found. Overnight purpose described as room-by-room temperature, watering, light, dryness, catalog care, and readiness of the seed library and observatory for public use. The sentence was enough. Anyone reading the log later would know what the notebook contained and why Mara had marked the entry. She did not copy a long passage or add an interpretation. The work itself already showed the meaning. She placed the pencil beside the logbook and lifted Mrs. Sato's notebook with both hands. The matching shelf was farther inside the seed library, along the cabinets she had just put in order. Mara followed the labels without searching. Each section led naturally to the next, until she reached the catalog position named inside the cover. There was a clear space waiting between two other records. Before setting the notebook there, Mara checked the neighboring marks. The one on the left came immediately before it. The one on the right followed immediately after. She slid Mrs. Sato's notebook into the space until the spine stood level. Its return was complete. Mara stepped back and looked along the shelf. Nothing marked the notebook as newly arrived. It had simply resumed its proper place among the records. Ready to be found again when someone needed it, she returned to the table and gathered the return slip. Its information had already been entered, so she placed it with the completed catalog record. The logbook remained open beneath the lamp, showing the drawer checks, the notebook return, and the short line about the purpose of the night round. Rain continued above the glass with the same light, even sound. Mara no longer carried a question about why the conservatory needed tending after dark. The answer was present in the rooms themselves. Different temperatures, different watering needs, different lamps, dry and orderly records, and two quiet public refuges kept ready through the evening. The entrance hall connected them as a reception and passage space. It was practical work divided into manageable rounds. She turned to the next open section of the logbook. The discovery had settled into an ordinary understanding, and the next gentle part of the work was waiting exactly where she had left it. Mara turned to the next open section of the logbook. The page had been ruled into narrow columns for catalog marks, shelf positions, and short notes. Most of the lines required only a check or a few plain words. Beneath the shaded lamp, the paper was warm in color, while the seed library beyond the table remained cool and softly lit. Mrs. Sato's notebook was already back on its shelf. Its return had been entered, its pages checked, and its useful observation recorded. Mara did not need to take it down again. The sentence she had copied into the logbook held what she needed. Warm rooms, cool rooms, watering, shaded lamps. The seed library kept dry and orderly for its collections, and ready as a quiet public refuge at appropriate evening times, and the entrance hall kept clear as the passage to it. She read her own entry once, then looked toward the cabinet beside the table. The drawers there were in order, but the catalog sheet for that section still needed its night check. Mara drew the sheet closer. Each line named a drawer range and gave a small space for notes about storage conditions. Most of those spaces already contained brief descriptions: dry shelf, shaded section, inner cabinet. The language was useful because it was direct. A person returning a packet could see not only where it belonged, but what kind of place that position provided. One line, however, carried an older description that was less exact. It read simply, "North side." Mara looked at the matching drawer. The words were not wrong. The cabinet did stand along the north side of the seed library, but the note did not explain the condition that mattered. Mrs. Sato's observation had made that distinction easy to see. The seed library was kept dry and orderly through the night, so its packets and records remained in good condition. At the proper evening times, that same careful room could also offer quiet readers, a sheltered table, and shaded light. This particular drawer stood in the part of the cabinet, away from the warmer entrance hall passage, and beneath the gentler reach of the lamp. Mara did not alter the catalog sheet at once. She stood, carried the sheet to the cabinet, and found the drawer range named on the line. The label card sat evenly in its holder. She opened the drawer only far enough to see the ordered packet edges within. The packets were dry, upright, and correctly placed. Nothing about their arrangement needed changing. She rested 2 fingers on the wooden pull and considered the wording again. The useful decision was small. The catalog note did not need a description of the whole building or an explanation of the night round. It only needed to help the next person understand why this drawer belonged in this position. Mara closed the drawer and returned to the table. In the note column, she drew one light pencil line through north side, leaving the old words readable. Beside them, she wrote, "Dry, shaded cabinet section." She paused to read the new phrase. It said enough. It matched the room as it was, and it used the same practical understanding Mrs. Sato had set down in her notebook. The location mattered because it kept the packets in a dry, gently lit part of the library. Anyone consulting the catalog could now see that without having to guess what was important about the north wall. Mara added the date in the narrow margin. Then she entered the change in the conservatory logbook. Catalog, storage. Note clarified for drawer range. Position unchanged. The pencil moved with a faint scratch across the paper. Rain answered above the glass in a softer, less regular pattern, individual drops slipping into the general hush. The sounds remained separate enough to notice and quiet enough to leave alone. Mara set the catalog sheet beside the logbook and checked the next line. Its wording already read, "Inner dry cabinet." She looked toward the matching drawers and left the entry as it was. The next said shaded lower section. That, too, was clear. There was no reason to revise a useful label merely because she had revised the one before it. She continued line by line. For each range, she read the catalog note, found the corresponding label on the cabinet. and confirmed that the two agreed. Sometimes she remained seated and followed the orderly progression of the drawer fronts with her eyes. At other times, she rose and crossed the few steps between the table and the cabinet, carrying the sheet in one hand. The work varied gently with each line. One drawer required only a glance at its centered label. Another needed to be opened so she could confirm the first and last packet marks. A third had a clear catalog note, but a label card sitting slightly low in its holder. Mara pressed the lower edge upward until the margins were even. She opened that drawer and checked the packet range before closing it again. Nothing had changed except the ease with which the label could be read. In the logbook, she wrote, "Label centered, catalog range confirmed." The dry scent of paper became a little stronger whenever a drawer opened. When it closed, the mild smell of wood returned. Near the door, the air carried a faint trace of wet stone and leaves from the entrance hall. The two scents met without blending completely, marking the boundary between the quiet public refuge of cabinets, records, and reading light, and the entrance hall that received visitors and kept their passage clear. Mara reached the end of the first catalog sheet. She placed a small check at the bottom, then returned it to the flat space beside the logbook. The revised storage note remained visible near the middle of the page. It did not stand out from the other entries. That was a sign that it belonged. It had joined the catalog's ordinary language of dry shelves, shaded sections, and clear positions. A second sheet covered the shelf where Mrs. Sato's notebook now stood. Mara brought it forward and followed the listed marks until she reached the notebook's entry. The return had already been completed, so she did not disturb the shelf. From the table, she could see its spine level with the records on either side. The catalog line named the correct section and described it as the inner record shelf. Mara left the wording unchanged. She placed a check beside the contents verification and another beside the return date. The slip from the entrance hall had been entered with the completed catalog record, and every part of the notebook's journey now agreed. Received, checked, recorded, and shelved. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing the steps brought together on one line. Nothing remained suspended between rooms. The entrance hall no longer held an item awaiting return, and the seed library held no record without a confirmed place. Mara finished the remaining entries on the sheet. When she had done so, she stacked the two catalog sheets squarely. She aligned their lower edges against the table, once lightly, and slid them into their proper section of the logbook. The page with Mrs. Sato's observation remained earlier in the night's entries. Its practical explanation did not need repeating in full. It had already guided the one decision that required it. Dry, shaded cabinet section. The phrase was modest, but it joined purpose to place. It showed why the label belonged where it did, and what condition the night staff were preserving. The same kind of attention extended beyond the seed library through rooms that held their own warmth, coolness, water, and light. Here, it became a clear line in a catalog and a row of packets left undisturbed. That care served both parts of the room's purpose. It protected the collections by keeping their shelves dry, shaded, and orderly. It also left the library calm and usable when it opened as a quiet refuge during appropriate evening hours. A reader could sit beneath the shaded lamp because the records had been returned, the table had been cleared, and every packet remained in its proper place. The entrance hall supported that use by receiving visitors and keeping the short passage open, without becoming the refuge itself. Mara closed the drawer she had used for the final comparison and ran her gaze along the cabinet. The fronts rested flush. Their labels formed an even sequence beneath the lamp. Mrs. Sato's notebook stood on its record shelf, and the observatory register remained near the door in its own settled place. No book or packet waited on the table now. She carried the completed return slip and catalog record to the entrance hall. The passage was only a short one. As she crossed the threshold, the air changed from dry paper and wood to the clean scent of damp stone and nearby leaves. The entrance hall lamps cast warm, modest pools across the floor. Rain showed dimly beyond the outer glass, softened by reflection. Mara placed the completed record where the night's finished entries were kept. She checked that its edge lay straight, then returned to the seed library with only the logbook and pencil. Back beneath the shaded lamp, she added one final line. Returned notebook and related catalog check complete. Library dry, ordered, and ready for its quiet evening use. She read the short group of entries from top to bottom. The drawer ranges were confirmed. One label had been centered. One storage note had been made more useful. Mrs. Sato's notebook was secure on its shelf. The collections were protected by the room's dry order, and the clear table beneath the shaded lamp remained available when quiet readers were received there. Mara set the pencil beside the logbook. The next part of the round would begin from the entrance hall, along a path she already knew. For the moment, the seed library required nothing further. Rain rested softly above it. The cabinets held their ordered rows, and the revised catalog note waited quietly among the others. The entrance hall kept the way clear beyond the threshold, while the library itself remained dry, calm, and ready for the next ordinary use. Mara left the pencil beside the open logbook and looked once more along the seed library cabinets. The drawer fronts rested flush beneath the shaded lamp. Their labels made an even sequence across the wood. Mrs. Sato's notebook stood on the inner record shelf, level with the volumes on either side, and the observatory register remained in its familiar place, near the entrance hall door. Nothing waited to be sorted or returned. The night's catalog work had followed a simple path. A notebook had come in through the entrance hall. Its mark had led Mara to the correct record. The record had led her through the ordered drawers, and Mrs. Sato's entry had given plain words to work. Mara had already been doing throughout her shifts. Now Mara traced that path back. She began with the catalog sheets. They had already been checked and stacked, but she lifted them once more to make sure their lower edges were aligned. The revised line, dry, shaded cabinet section, sat naturally among the other storage notes. It described a condition rather than merely a direction, and it would remain useful to the next person who consulted the catalog. Mara slid the sheets into their section of the logbook. The paper settled flat. She ran one finger along the inner edge so that no corner remained folded beneath another page, then turned back to the entries she had made that night. Drawer ranges confirmed, label centered, returned notebook and related catalog check complete. Overnight purpose described as room-by-room temperature, watering, and light care, with the seed library and observatory maintained for quiet public evening use. The final entry was accurate, though Mara read it slowly before leaving it. She wanted the record to be as clear as the work itself. Mrs. Sato's notebook had not revealed a hidden custom or an old unanswered question. It had simply gathered the conservatory's night needs into one practical description. Different rooms required different care after dark. Their temperatures did not change at the same pace. Their soil did not need water at the same time. Their lamps served different purposes. The seed library had to remain dry and orderly, ready for people who came to sit quietly with its records during the appropriate evening hours. The observatory had to be prepared for its public evenings beneath the opening roof. Between them, the entrance hall remained sheltered and lit, providing a clear access route from one part of the building to the next. That was why the building was tended overnight. Mara placed the pencil on the page and added a short sentence beneath the earlier entry. Night care keeps each room at its proper temperature, moisture, and light. Keeps the seed library and observatory ready for quiet public evening use, and keeps the entrance hall clear and lit between them. She read the sentence once. It needed nothing more. The pencil made a faint sound as she placed a small check in the margin. Then Mara set it parallel to the spine of the logbook and rested her hands lightly on the table. Rain moved over the glass above the seed library. It had become less even than before, with a few drops arriving separately and then a longer hush between them. The room remained dry beneath that soft weather. Paper, wood, and stored seed kept their mild scents. The shaded lamp cast a warm circle across the completed entries. Mara rose and followed the catalog labels toward Mrs. Sato's notebook. She did not need to take it from the shelf. The sequence itself was enough to confirm the return. Each mark led to the next, ending at the notebook's proper place between the record before it and the record after it. Its spine sat straight. No slip protruded from its pages. Nothing remained on the table that belonged with it. The notebook's journey was complete. Mara let her gaze travel back along the cabinets. The labels she had checked earlier now did more than name positions. Together, they made a route through the room. A person could begin at the catalog, follow the drawer ranges, find a packet or record, and return it without uncertainty. The order did not call attention to itself. It simply made each small action easier. She returned to the table and closed the logbook halfway, leaving one finger between the pages. Before finishing in the room, she checked the threshold. The entrance hall door stood only a few steps away. Near it, the observatory register waited on its shelf, ready for the next public evening on the roof. Mara passed it and crossed from the cool dryness of the seed library into the entrance hall. The change in the air was gentle but distinct. The entrance hall carried the clean scent of damp stone and nearby leaves. Its lamps made warm, modest pools on the floor. Beyond the outer glass, rain softened the darkness and blurred its own reflections. The hall was quiet, sheltered, and well lit. Its reception surface was clear, and the passage through it remained easy to follow. It was ready to receive visitors and guide them onward to the seed library or observatory, without becoming the quiet refuge itself. Mara paused just beyond the threshold. From there, she could see both rooms at once. Behind her, the seed library held its ordered drawers, dry shelves, shaded reading light, and clear table. Before her, the entrance hall held the softer air of the public passage. They were connected by only a few steps, but they asked for different kinds of attention. That difference no longer needed explanation. The threshold made it concrete. On one side were paper, wood, catalog marks, and shaded light in a room maintained for quiet reading, as well as careful storage. On the other were damp stone, reflected lamps, and a clear route through the building. Farther along that route, the observatory waited for its own public evenings. Night care did not make the rooms alike. It allowed each room to remain comfortably itself. Mara carried the logbook into the entrance hall. The completed return slip and catalog record lay where she had placed them among the night's finished entries. Their edges were still straight. She checked the top line, confirmed that the notebook's catalog mark matched the one she had recorded in the seed library, and left the papers undisturbed. The return path now joined without a gap. Mrs. Sato's notebook had been received in the entrance hall, carried into the seed library, checked against the catalog, and restored to its shelf. Its practical observation had been entered in the conservatory logbook. The catalog had guided the object back to its place, and the threshold had shown how the entrance hall supported the two quiet public rooms by keeping the way to them sheltered, lit, and clear. Mara opened the logbook to the page she had marked with her finger. Beneath the entrance hall lamp, she read the final sentence again. The words remained plain and sufficient. The rooms received the care their conditions required. The seed library and observatory were maintained for quiet public evening use. The entrance hall joined them as a protected access route. She added the time in the narrow margin, then closed the cover. There was no further question to carry into the next part of the shift. She stood quietly for a moment with the closed logbook beneath one hand. The rain continued beyond the glass. Its reflection lay across the entrance hall floor in a dim, steady sheen, while the lamps remained warm above it. Mara turned back toward the seed library doorway. The shaded lamp was still on, as it needed to be. The table beneath it was clear, except for the pencil. The cabinets held their ordered packets. Mrs. Sato's notebook rested on its proper shelf, and the observatory register stood near the door for its next ordinary use. She crossed the threshold once more, picked up the pencil, and placed it along the shallow groove at the top of the closed logbook. Then she carried the book back to the entrance hall and set it on the smooth wooden surface where the next round would begin. Its spine lay square with the edge. The pencil rested securely in the groove. Nothing rolled, shifted, or waited to be put away. Behind her, the seed library remained cool, dry, ordered, and quietly ready for its evening readers. Along the familiar path, the observatory register waited for the next public evening on the roof. Around her, the entrance hall stayed softly lit against the rain, keeping the way between those rooms clear. Mara had a familiar route beneath her feet and a settled account of why the night work continued. For now, the logbook rested closed on the entrance hall surface, ready for the next ordinary entry. The logbook rested closed on the smooth wooden surface in the entrance hall, its spine square with the edge. The pencil lay securely in the shallow groove along the top. Mara stood beside it for a little while. Behind her, the seed library remained cool, dry, and ordered. Before her, the entrance hall stayed softly lit against the rain. The route between them was only a few steps long, and there was nothing left on it that needed to be carried, sorted, or explained. Mrs. Sato's notebook had returned to its shelf. The drawers had been checked. Their packets followed their catalog marks, and their labels sat evenly beneath the shaded lamp. The completed return slip and catalog record had been placed with the night's finished entries. In the logbook, Mara had written the practical answer plainly enough. Night care kept each room at its proper temperature, moisture, and light, kept the seed library and observatory ready as quiet public refuges during their appropriate evening hours, and kept the entrance hall softly lit as the connecting space between them. The answer did not lead anywhere new. It settled among the other entries, as naturally as the notebook had settled between the records on either side of it. Mara placed one hand on the closed cover of the logbook. The surface was smooth beneath her palm. She did not open it. There was no further line to add. Rain continued beyond the outer glass. Its reflection lay across the entrance hall floor in a dim sheen, changing only when another drop moved down the pane. The lamps cast warm, modest pools over the stone. Near the seed library doorway, the clean scent of damp leaves gave way to the drier scents of paper and wood. Mara turned toward the library. She followed the familiar route back across the threshold, carrying nothing. Her footsteps were even and quiet. The change in the air met her as it had before. A little cooler here, with none of the entrance hall's dampness. The shaded lamp still made a warm circle over the central table. The table was clear now. Mrs. Sato's notebook no longer waited beside the catalog. The return slip was gone. The catalog sheets were back in the logbook, and the logbook itself rested in the entrance hall. Only the plain surface remained beneath the light. Mara paused beside it and looked along the nearest cabinet. The drawer fronts were flush. She had already checked them from the upper left to the final lower row. One label had been centered. Two packets had exchanged places. Another had been returned to the drawer shown by its catalog mark. Those actions were finished and did not need repeating. She let her eyes travel along the labels without reading each one. Their order was enough. At the inner record shelf, Mrs. Sato's notebook stood level between the volume before it and the volume after it. Its spine showed the catalog mark Mara had confirmed at the beginning of the hour. No return slip projected from the cover. No corner of paper had caught between it and the neighboring records. Mara did not take it down. The notebook had already done all that was required of it. It had returned in good condition. Its pages had been checked. Its brief observation had gathered the night's work into a useful description. And that description had been entered in the conservatory logbook. Warm rooms, cool rooms, watering, shaded lamps, dry records, 2 quiet public refuges kept ready, and a softly lit hall joining the way between them. There was no hidden reason beneath those ordinary needs. The conservatory was tended at night, because its rooms continued to change after the day grew quiet. Care did not stop, merely because the rain had softened the view through the glass, or the daytime visitors had gone. Temperature, moisture, and light still needed their small adjustments. Records still needed to be returned. During their appropriate public evening hours, the Seed Library could offer a dry, sheltered table for quiet reading, and the observatory could offer a quiet place beneath the opening roof. The entrance hall received the people who came to them and kept the passage between them clear. That knowledge now belonged to Mara's round in the same way the drawer labels belonged to the cabinets. It could guide her without asking for attention. She walked to the shelf near the entrance hall door. The observatory register remained there, its spine level with the 2 slim volumes beside it. Its return had been recorded earlier. Mara looked at the shelf edge and saw that no folded paper had slipped beneath the books. She left them as they were. Rain brushed softly over the glass above the Seed Library. A few drops crossed the panes separately, followed by a longer hush. The cabinets held their dry scent. The shaded lamp remained steady. Mara walked back to the doorway. On the entrance hall side, the light was warmer, and the floor reflected it faintly. On the library side, the light rested more closely over paper, labels, and wood. The 2 adjoining rooms did not need to feel the same. The night work kept each one comfortably itself. She crossed into the entrance hall again. The logbook and pencil waited exactly as she had left them. Mara moved the pencil a little nearer the center of the groove. It had not been in danger of rolling, but the small adjustment made it lie parallel to the spine. She lifted her hand and looked at it once. That was all. She followed the edge of the wooden surface with her fingertips, checking by habit that no loose paper remained beneath the book. The surface was clear. The completed records were already in their proper place. Nothing waited to be carried back through the doorway. The entrance hall required no further task. Its lamps were on. Their light reached the path without glare. The stone remained clean, beneath the faint reflections from the rain. The hall was ready to receive anyone arriving for the Seed Library, or an observatory evening, and its softly lit passage would remain clear after Mara moved on to the next ordinary part of her shift. She stood beside the logbook and let her shoulders settle. The hour had begun with objects still in motion. The observatory register had needed to return to its shelf. Mrs. Sato's notebook had waited beside its slip. Drawers had needed checking, packets had needed comparison, and a catalog note had needed clearer words. Now every movement had reached its end. The register stood near the Seed Library door. Mrs. Sato's notebook stood on the inner record shelf. The packets rested in their marked sequence. The revised catalog note described a dry, shaded cabinet section. The finished return papers lay with the other completed records. The logbook held the time and the plain account of the work. Mara did not rehearse the list again. She no longer needed it. The arrangement of the rooms held the same account without words. She looked through the Seed Library doorway. From the entrance hall, she could see the warm circle of the shaded lamp and the nearest run of cabinet fronts. The light did not reach every corner, nor did it need to. It reached the table and labels used for the night's catalog work. The rest of the room remained in a softer shade, cool and dry beneath the rain. Mara walked back once more, following the same short path. At the threshold, the scent changed. Inside the library, she placed her palm lightly against the front of the cabinet she had finished first. The wood was smooth and cool. Every drawer behind it had been checked. She removed her hand without opening one. The action left nothing new to record. She continued to the table and stood within the edge of the lamp's circle. The empty surface showed the work's completion more clearly than another note could have done. No returned book waited for attention. No packet had been left out. No sheet remained to be filed. Mara looked toward Mrs. Sato's notebook. It remained part of the shelf now, one record among the others. Its practical sentence had not changed the room. It had only named the care already visible there. Dry shelves, ordered drawers, shaded light. A clear route back to the entrance hall. Mara turned away from the shelf and retraced that route. Her pace had grown slower, not from tiredness or uncertainty, but because there was less to do. At the beginning of the hour, each stop had asked for a check, a comparison, or an entry. Now the same few steps asked only to be crossed. She passed out the observatory register. She crossed the threshold. She returned to the logbook. For a moment, she considered whether the shaded lamp in the library looked different from the entrance hall lamps. It did, but the difference was already familiar. The library light stayed close to the working table and cabinet labels. The entrance hall light spread in wider pools over the stone, marking the passage that connected the library with the route toward the observatory. Each served the space in which it stood. No adjustment was needed. Mara rested her fingertips on the logbook's cover, then drew them away. The pencil remained straight in its groove. Outside, the rain had become a fine, nearly even sound. It softened the view without closing it. The glass held the weather at a comfortable distance, and the entrance hall remained sheltered behind it. Mara listened for a few breaths. There was the light touch of rain overhead, and beyond the outer panes. There was the quiet steadiness of the lamps. There was her own breathing, easy and unforced. Nothing interrupted the room. She looked back through the doorway for the last time that hour. The seed library was ready. Its air remained cool and dry. The cabinet fronts made an orderly line beneath the shaded lamp. Mrs. Sato's notebook stood in its proper catalog position. Its clear table and quiet reading light would be ready for its next appropriate public evening. Near the door, the observatory register waited for its next ordinary use, when the observatory would again offer its own modest refuge beneath the opening roof. The entrance hall was ready as well. Its stone carried the soft reflection of the lamps, and the rain remained outside the glass. The logbook rested closed where the next round would begin. The hall offered a sheltered, softly lit way between the two public rooms without needing to become either one. Between the entrance hall and the seed library, the threshold held no waiting object and no unfinished question. Mara left the book closed. She moved a few steps away from the wooden surface, then stopped where both the logbook and the seed library doorway remained within view. There was no need to dim a lamp, move a chair, reopen a drawer, or check a shelf again. The rooms had reached the state the night work was meant to preserve. Cool where coolness belonged, dry where paper and seed were stored. Softly lit where a person might pass between the quiet rooms or pause to read and work within the library. The conservatory's overnight purpose was no longer something Mara needed to ask about. It was present in that simple arrangement. The seed library keeping its records dry, and its shaded table ready. The observatory prepared for its ordinary public evenings. The entrance hall keeping a warm path between them through the rain, and a caretaker leaving every space ready for the hours ahead. The actions of the round became fewer. Mara stood. She breathed. She looked once at the quiet line of light through the seed library doorway. Then she let the settled rooms remain as they were. On the entrance hall surface, the closed logbook lay square with the edge, the pencil resting straight along its spine. Beyond it, the shaded library lamp glowed out over the empty table and ordered drawers, while rain moved softly across the glass above them. The observatory register remained on its shelf near the clear, softly lit connecting path. Everything needed for the night was in its proper place.